Today you're at the Ypsilanti Automotive Heritage Museum in the city of Ypsilanti, Michigan, 30 miles west of Detroit. What we have created here is a museum attempting to tell the automotive history of our area here. And right this minute we're in a Hudson dealership that started off as a Dodge dealership way back in 1916, became a Hudson dealership in 1933, and continued as a Hudson dealership until Hudson went out of business in 1957. What's unique about it is the dealership has the feel and the look of a 1930s, 1940s car dealership, and it has that feel because it is absolutely original. After World War II ended, didn't need bombers anymore, and there was a giant factory, the biggest one under one roof in the world, and two industrialists got together and decided to manufacture cars. There was a pent-up demand for consumer goods after World War II. They went together and created a company called Kaiser-Frazer using their last names. And Kaiser-Frazer manufactured cars here in Ypsilanti then at the old bomber plant from the end of World War II until 1953. When 1953 sales had declined and they were consolidated into Toledo, Ohio. And in that factory then, General Motors took it over and needed a factory after losing their hydromatic plant from a fire in Livonia outside of Detroit. They moved here to Ypsilanti to manufacture hydromatic transmissions, and then they took half of the factory and used it as an assembly plant. So we've got a General Motors story here. We've got a Kaiser-Frazer story here, which is major industries, auto industries in the last half of the 20th century. Hudsons were not manufactured here in Ypsilanti, they were manufactured in Detroit, but we have this Hudson dealership that's a very good example of car dealerships in the early part of the 20th century. We use the dealership then also to tell the Hudson story. We're in the front of our dealership, where the showroom was, where you'd come and look at your car that you were looking to shop and buy. Here in our showroom, we have displayed a 1933 Terraplane. We're in a Hudson dealership. 1933 Terraplane was designed and planned by Hudson Motor Car Company to compete with Ford, General Motors, and Chrysler, to compete with the Ford car, Chevrolet car, and Plymouth car. Hudson was sort of a mid-price car. In order to stay competitive, they went down into the marketplace to compete with Ford, Plymouth, and Chevrolet. Visitors who come to our museum look at it and say, hey, that looks like a gangster car. Well, you know, the era of the gangsters was Prohibition in the 1930s, 1933 cars, so cars of that period of time had this design. It's called a Terraplane, kind of a play on terra, earth, and plane, airplane. Air travel in the early 1930s was becoming much more popular, and so it would be a name that was really a catchy name that went with that period of time. When the car was introduced, they even had Amelia Earhart christen the first Terraplane to call attention to the modern progress in air travel. We're looking here at a 1953 Hudson Jet. In the 1950s, there was the beginning of what we now call the compact cars. Hudson also got into the compact car business and built this 1953 Hudson Jet. A little bit smaller and lower price than the full-size Hudson. By then, Hudson had discontinued their Terraplane car, and so this was also kind of a re-entry into the low-price market. Next to it, we have a 1946 Hudson. 1946, after World War II, the manufacturers that had cars that were manufactured prior to the war, after the war was over, they used their bodies and their dies that they had used for their cars in the 1930s and maybe updated the decoration, the grille a little bit, but essentially they were what we call rebadged cars. They took their 1930s, early 1940s cars and no production during World War II, and brought them out again after World War II when the demand for cars was pretty big. And so by 1954, and when the sales decreased, they didn't have money for engineering to come up with a new design, a new car. They also, with regard to engines, they had a 6-cylinder engine, and in the 1950s, major manufacturers were coming out with modern V8 engines, and Hudson just couldn't keep up with the engineering, the money to do the engineering for a new V8 engine. And then by 1955, they were out of business. We're in the Kaiser-Frazer / Tucker room of our museum. And what we have here is a collection of cars that were manufactured by Kaiser-Frazer. So after the war was over, the major manufacturers used their dies and designs from the war and were able to come out with cars right away in 1946 because they didn't have to do any design work. They just used their pre-war models. In the case of Kaiser-Frazer, they didn't have pre-war models. So they had to do their design work, and Kaiser and Frazer were a little bit late entering the car market after World War II because they had to do design work. But what they did come up with was something new, fresh, and new looking. And what we have here is an example of a 1948 Kaiser, which was the first body style that Kaiser and Frazer came up with. What's brand new is what's sometimes called slab styling, which is a full flat surface on the sides. And in post-war years, that was something brand new and fresh. Kaiser and Frazer were very well received. First of all, it was hard to buy new cars because there were so many people wanting to buy them. In addition to that, it was a fresh new design. They were only in business for 6 years, but in those 6 years, they sold almost, I think it's like 900,000 cars in 6 years because of the demand and because of their fresh new look. Henry J., named in honor of Henry J. Kaiser, one of the two partners that created the company. 1951, they came out with again, the Henry J., which was one of the beginning compact cars in the automotive industry. It was a very low price car and rather primitive in interior design. It surely is something that is stark compared to modern day cars. It was inexpensive. Price tag on it was $1,499 in 1951. Historically, they were bringing out these lower price cars. There had to be a demand out there, but it wasn't the savior of Kaiser-Frazer. I think that probably was a reason to do it, was to expand their market base so they could appeal to more buyers. What we have here is a precursor of what we now call our SUVs. It's a car, but the design of it is such that the whole rear section is a hatchback design. And in the rear here, the rear window lifts up, and the rear, what we would call nowadays a trunk, the rear trunk area opens up. And so you could use it to haul your lumber. If you wish, when you go camping, you could sleep in the back. So it's sort of the same function that SUVs now serve to the auto industry. Kaiser-Frazer in 1953 consolidated their operations, left Ypsilanti, went to Toledo, and they actually bought Willys Overland in Toledo in 1953. They actually took some of their Kaiser dies and transported them to South America, and they manufactured cars like the Kaiser cars you see here in South America for a period of time before they eventually closed up and ceased operations. Back about 10, 12 years ago, there was an effort in southeastern Michigan to tell the story of the auto industry. By then, we're talking about the year 2000, 1999. By then, the auto industry in Detroit was, we're 100 years old, had accumulated a lot of history, and people would come to southeastern Michigan to visit the auto history of our area. So at that time, a group of auto people in Detroit got together and petitioned Congress to create a national heritage area. National heritage areas are subsidiaries of the National Park Service, and they're all over the United States, and they are like a national park, except they don't have defined boundaries. In southeastern Michigan, our heritage area, which is called Motor Cities National Heritage Area, is telling the automotive history of our area, and it's a consortium of auto sites all over southeastern Michigan. Our museum is part of the Automotive National Heritage Area. The Eleanor Etzel Ford House in Grosse Point's part of the Automotive National Heritage Area. The Dodge House at Meadowbrook Hall is part of the Auto Heritage Area. So we're a collection of sites, and we try to market each other to tell visitors to our area places that they can go to view our automotive history of our area. The industry has down times, but it also has up times, and collectively the auto industry has been a very important part of the economy of our region.